Chapter 4. As Frances flung the door open with a crash and dashed in the room, Ma stared in amazement first at Frances, then the brown paper parcel she still held. "The shirts?" she began, but Frances dropped the package and threw herself in her mother's arms. "Oh, Ma," she cried, "something terrible's happened. Please don't get angry, Ma." Ma moved back, holding Frances by the shoulders so she could look in her eyes, and said firmly, "Frances Mary, calm yourself and tell me. What is it?" Ma's face was pale. Her gaze didn't waver. "Mike's been arrested. He's a copper stealer," Frances blurted out and burst into tears, barely managing to relate the entire story. By the time she had finished her tale, Peg and Petey were wailing. Megan's eyes were wide with horror. Ma, her lips pale and tight, quickly wrapped her shawl over her head and shoulders and strode toward the door. "I'll be going to the police station, Megan," she said. "You'll know what to do for the little ones." "I'll come with you, Ma," Frances insisted. "No," her mother told her. "Go about your work as usual. Tell Mr. Lomax I was detained by a family emergency, and I'll be along later. It's all he needs to know." As Frances hesitated, Ma said, "You're a good, dependable girl, love. Do your job. We need the money." Frances sat on the cot, helping Megan soothe and distract her little sister and brother. "What happened to Mike?" Megan murmured. "What will happen to Mike?" Megan murmured. "I don't know," Frances said, "but everything will turn out all right. You'll see. Ma can take care of it." Megan looked at her gratefully, and Frances wished she could have believed her own words. How could Ma, even with all her determination, keep Mike from being sent to Tombs prison? Later, while she was scrubbed hard at the polished floors in the office building under the watchful eye and sharp tongue of Mrs. Watts, Frances recalled what she had told Megan. She prayed that her words would turn out true, that Ma would help everything turn out all right. But the hours crept by and Ma didn't come. Frances jumped at every sound. She dropped her cleaning tools, forgot where she left her broom, and spilled a bucket of scrub water. For that she took a tongue lashing from Mrs. Watts. Where was Ma? What had happened? Finally, Frances jumped to her feet with a shout of relief as she saw Ma stride into the hallway of the office building, her bucket and brush in hand. Ma stopped to lay a hand on Frances's shoulder. "Mike will be locked up for the night," she said in a low voice. "He'll go before the judge tomorrow morning at 9. "Have you been at the police station all this while?" Frances whispered, clutching her mother's arms. "No," Ma said. "I found Danny. I sent him home. There was someone I had to talk to." "About Mike?" "Yes." "Will Mike go to prison?" For just a moment, Ma's eyes looked old and tired. "I pray not, love. If the judge will allow Mike to be helped." Frances interrupted, "But who would help Mike?" "I'll tell you later, when it's the right time." "Why not now?" Frances begged. Ma pulled Frances to her and held her tightly against her hair. She murmured, "Frances Mary, you'll have to trust me no matter what happens. I'm asking you to be strong for me. Help me do what I must. Just know that I love you with all my heart." Frances shivered. The urgency in her mother's voice frightened her. "Ma," Frances pleaded, "let me go with you tomorrow, please." She expected her mother to argue, but Ma simply said, "Yes, we will all be there." Frances was comforted. She should have known Ma would want them all to be at hand to help Mike. Of course they'd be there. Mrs. Watts, puffing with indignation, descended upon them, intent on informing the tardy Mrs. Kelly about her daughter's carelessness, and Frances hurried back to her job. As she scrubbed the dirty floor, she began to puzzle over Ma's words, what she meant when she had asked for trust. Whom had she called on for help? Nameless fears prickled under Frances's skin, and she shuddered, again afraid of what the next day might bring. In the morning, as soon as everyone was dressed and fed, Ma asked Frances, "Will you take the children outside? I'll come for you when I'm ready." Frances stared at her mother. "Why?" she asked. "What are you going to do? Can't you tell me?" "I asked for your help," Ma reminded her. "Right now, the best you can do is the best help you can give me is to help the little ones and keep an eye on them outside. Please trust me, Frances." Frances nodded and reached for Petey's hand, leading the other children outside. In about 15 minutes, Ma joined them. She carried a plump paper parcel, wrapped tightly with string, and Frances eyed it suspiciously. The contents of the parcel must have been something to do with Mike. It was soft and lumpy, as if it might contain clothes. Did that mean Ma thought Mike would be coming home with them? Oh, if only Ma would answer her questions. Together, the Kelly family walked the many blocks to the city courthouse and up the wide steps leading to its large outer doors. Frances was awed into silence by the high lobby ceiling with its ornate arches and by the many people who pushed and twisted past one another, hurrying in and out of the building. The children clung closely to their mother, but Ma had spied someone over the heads of those around her, and she steered her family to the direction of a portly gentleman with a thick, dark beard and eyebrows to match. He smiled and solemnly shook hands with each of the Kellys as Ma introduced them one by one. "Children, this is Charles Loring Brace," Ma said. "The man who sends orphans west." Frances remembered his name with alarm. How could he help Mike? Mike isn't an orphan. Frances studied Reverend Brace as he pulled a watch from the little pocket in the front of his vest and glanced at it before tucking it back in place. Was he here to defend Mike, to keep him out of jail? She looked from him to her mother and shivered, suddenly cold with suspicion that Reverend Brace could keep Mike out of jail in only one way, by sending him to live with a family in the West. "Time to go to court," Reverend Brace said. "The room's this direction." "Ma," Frances urgently tugged at her mother's skirt, but Ma shook her head for silence and followed Reverend Brace into the courtroom. Frances wanted to plead from her, to beg her not to let Mike be sent away, but a calmer inner voice kept reminding her that a new home for Mike would be much better than a cell in Tombs prison. And hadn't Mike said over and over he'd like to go west? Most of the benches in the large, crowded courtroom were filled, but Reverend Brace found a place where the Kellys could squeeze in. Frances ducked her head a little and lifted Peg onto her lap, glad for the chance to hold tightly to someone. Peg wasn't her usual energetic, independent self, and snuggled gratefully against her sister. Megan sat between Frances and Ma, while Danny slumped unhappily on her left. Frances hurt almost as much for Danny as for Mike. He was heartbroken at what had happened to the brother he worshipped. Men in dark, snugly buttoned suit coats and trousers, many of them wearing full beards that hid their high collars, talked to one another inside an area that was separated by rows of seats and a long wooden railing. Against the far wall stood a high desk, and behind the desk sat a judge who wore a black robe with full sleeves. Suddenly the room was called to order. People either left the area or sat down as a young man, dirty and ragged, was brought by uniformed officers to stand before a judge. As the accusation against him of assault and robbery in Gramercy Park was read aloud, Frances leaned forward to listen. Robbery. The same charge would be brought against Mike. But Mike wasn't a real thief like this one. With a sharp jolt of fear, Frances knew the others in the room would see no difference between Mike and this thief. After the charge was read, the judge quickly conferred with two of the men who occasionally bent to whisper to the accuser and the accused, and then soundly rapped his gavel on his desk and loudly announced, 5 years, Tombs Prison. Frances shivered as the man was led away and another one brought before the judge. Would Mike's future be decided by his decision this swift? It took almost an hour by the big clock that hung on the side wall before Mike was let in. Petey, who had wiggled and squirmed before, almost falling asleep on Ma's lap, jumped up and yelled, Mike! That's Mike! Danny groaned aloud. Mike looked at them with fear and shame in his face. The judge turned to scowl at Petey, and Ma quickly hushed him. Frances held her breath as the charges against Mike were read aloud. Megan's fingernails dug into the palm of her hand, but Frances didn't mind the pain. The still angry gentleman, whose pocket had been picked, stood inside the railing and scowled at Mike. Your Honor, may I have your permission to approach the bench? Reverend Brace stood at the railing, facing the judge. Ah, Reverend Brace again, the judge said. I know you come to collect ragamuffins. Don't tell me you've come to speak a good word for this little thief. I have come to ask for Michael Kelly, Reverend Brace answered. As you know, Your Honor, it's my firm belief that these street children should have the chance at a new life with farm families in the West. I've talked to Michael's mother, and I sincerely believe that Michael is a good boy and was driven to thievery by the circumstances in which he lives. Frances cried aloud, and several people in the courtroom turned to look at her. Her guess had been right. Mike was going to be sent away. She might never see her brother again. The judge frowned. We've heard this sermon before, Reverend Brace. You have your convictions, and I have mine. I feel the best action to take with a boy who steals is to get him off the street. He picked up his gavel. Suddenly Ma stood, her voice rang out so loudly the judge started. Your Honor, she called. May I please speak? She continued without waiting for an answer. It's easy to see that both you and the Reverend Brace have the same idea. He wishes to take Michael off the street too. It's just that Reverend Brace has a different way of going about it, sir. Someone laughed. The judge blinked and looked hard at Ma, but she continued bravely. Your Honor, sir, I have 6 fine children, but since my husband died last year, our struggle has been difficult, and that my children have been exposed to the temptations of the street. I've done my best, but it's unable I am to both feed them and protect them from danger. She paused and took a deep breath. So I have asked Reverend Brace to send all my children to the West, to be placed in homes of good people who will give them what I can't. Please, sir, I'm begging you with all my heart to allow Michael to go with his brothers and sisters. Terrified, Frances cried out, Ma, you can't. But Ma, in her determination, ignored Frances, keeping her eyes on the judge. Frances heard Danny trying to smother a sob, and Peg on Frances's lap struggled to free herself, muttering, Let me out. And Petey, who clung to Ma, scared with big eyes at Frances, his plump face beginning to reflect the look of horror she knew he must see on her own. Come down here, ma'am. The judge looked at the paper in front of him and added, Mrs. Kelly. As Maud tried to sidle past the children on the bench to reach the aisle, Peg jumped to clasp her waist, and Petey grabbed her around her legs, yelling, Ma, don't leave me. Frances, you promised, Ma said as she tried to break Petey's hold. Help me now. Bring the children with you, the judge ordered. Quiet that boy. Frances, numb with shock, automatically took charge of the children. Holding the sobbing Petey with one hand, Peg with the other, she followed her mother, Megan and Danny down the aisle, through the gate to the railing, to a spot in front of the judge. Ouch! Peg complained as she squirmed, trying to pull her hand from Frances's tight grasp. You're hurting me. Megan reached for Peg, so Frances hoisted Petey into her arms and impatiently hissed, You must be quiet. And Petey gulped down a fresh sob, but the tears continued to stream down his face. Frances looked from the judge to her mother and back again, waiting for someone to say something. Ma's gaze didn't falter as she stood, quietly meeting the judge's look with shoulders back and chin held high. The judge carefully studied each of the Kellys in turn, scowling, rubbing his chin as he tried to make up his mind. It seemed forever before he finally turned to Reverend Brace. Is all that what Mrs. Kelly told me true to your knowledge, sir? Yes, Your Honor, Reverend Brace said. I've agreed to place all of her children in new homes. The judge hit his gavel on the desk with such force that Frances winced. They hereby release Michael Kelly to your care. He scowled again, this time at Mike. As for you, young man, if you do not prove worthy of a new home, if you must be sent back, then you'll find yourself residing in Tombs Prison with others of your kind. Before Ma could thank the judge, he waved them away and called for the next prisoner to be brought before him. They were shepherded out of the courtroom into the hallway, and soon an officer brought Mike to them. It's eternally grateful I am to you, Ma said to Reverend Brace. Michael will prove your trust in him. Of that I'm sure. She put a hand on Mike's shoulder. I want your solemn promise, Michael Patrick Kelly, that you'll never pickpocket again. I promise, Ma, Mike said. I already promised the same thing to myself. His chin began to tremble and he flung himself against his mother, hugging her around the waist. Ma thrust a parcel at Reverend Brace. Here are their belongings. Mike's book, a few toys, some clothes. For a moment she seemed to falter. They owned very little. He's not taking us now, Ma. We're going home, aren't we? Frances's heart pounded so loudly it made her dizzy. Reverend Brace rested a hand on her shoulder, but she jerked away from him. Ma shook her head. There's no time. Reverend Brace has arranged for you to join the children leaving today. Besides, it would be harder for all of us if you went home. It's much better this way. Her eyes shimmered as she added, Believe me, love. No, Frances shouted. You can't do this. Why are you sending us away? Danny cried. Is it because of what Mike did? He's not going to do it again, Ma. You heard him promise. It's my fault. I'm the family's bad luck penny, Megan whispered. She leaned against Frances and began to sob. It's not your fault. Ma's to blame, Frances said, but Megan and Danny's outbursts of tears had set off little ones. No one heard her. Ma tried to quiet Peg and Petey, who clung to her in desperation. She looked up to Frances. Help me, love. Help me make them understand. No, Frances steeled herself against the hurt and astonishment in her mother's eyes. I won't help you, because I don't understand either. Da's face suddenly came into her mind. He wouldn't have let this happen. It had nearly killed her to lose Da, and now she'd be losing Ma too, and at Ma's own wish. She clenched her teeth, fighting the tears away that met her mother's gaze with the strength and anger she possessed. How can a mother give away her own children? She demanded. Ma gripped Frances's shoulder and stared in her eyes. You heard what I told the judge. It's because I can't provide you with the good homes you should have. I can't keep the boys from the streets. I can't fill your stomachs with good food. It's the most painful thing I've ever had to do, Frances, but it's a sacrifice that I have to make. You don't love us enough to keep us. Oh, Frances, Mary, don't you realize it's because I love you so much that I'm able to send you away? Frances didn't speak. She didn't move to touch her mother, even though part of her ached to do it. If you loved someone, you kept that person close. You didn't send someone you cared about away to live among strangers. She couldn't understand her mother's mixed-up thinking. Her entire body ached with shock and confusion, and she clenched her teeth against the pain. When must we leave? Practical Megan Aunt whispered. Now, Ma said, and she knelt to enfold her children. Please, Ma, no, Megan sobbed. Peg, with her small, freckled face blotchy from tears, hiccuped dry sobs and clung tightly to one Ma's legs. Danny and Mike were pale, pressed shoulder to shoulder for support the way they had been after Da had died. It was like another death, Frances thought, only she felt as if she were the one who had died. All that was left of her was a hard, cold emptiness that was eating away at everything else inside of her. I don't want to go away from you, Petey wrapped his arms tightly around Ma's neck. My darling lad, it's for the best, Ma murmured, and Frances could hear Ma's voice tremble with the tears she was holding back. Ma wiped away Petey's tears and tried to cheer him with a smile, and even when she smiled, her face looked lined and exhausted. Reverend Brace told me you'd have wholesome food and a clean bed of your own, schooling, and all sorts of fine things the like of which I could never, ever give you, no matter how hard we work, Ma said. But we won't have you, Petey wailed. You'll have Frances, Ma told him. She looked up at Frances. A special care of this little one we'll be needing, and it's you I'll be counting on to give it. Frances just stared back. She wanted to tell her mother how lonely and hurt she was, but the words froze in her throat. Frances Mary Kelly. Her mother stood to face her voice firm and strong again. I want your promise. Frances nodded, and now her voice matched her mother's in all its strength and determination. I promise, she said. I also promise that I'll do my best to be a mother to these children, in place of the mother who doesn't want them. Can't you understand how much it hurts me to see you go? No, Frances cried. For a moment she wavered. I can't. I love you, Ma, and I thought you loved me, and I can't understand how you would give us away, and I'll never forgive you. Never. Oh, Ma took a step backward, holding her hands to her cheeks, flinching as though she'd been struck. Frances Mary, you've never in your life spoken such angry words to me. Frances just shook her head, unable to say another word. She knew she'd begin to cry uncontrollably as she tried to speak again. Ma's voice was heavy with sorrow. You, Frances, you who've been my strength in so many ways, so many times. It's sure I've been that I could count on you. Sure you'd understand. Frances desperately longed to reach out and hold her mother, but she couldn't. She wouldn't. Reverend Brace stepped forward and took Peg and Petey by the hand. Peg, her lower lip trembling, began to tug her hand away, but Petey just stared at Ma, his big blue eyes spilling over with tears. It's time to go now, Reverend Brace said. Gently, Ma touched each child one by one with her fingertips. It won't be forever, Danny, she whispered. We'll be together again someday. Mike, you're a good, brave lad. You've got a chance now. Prove yourself. She smiled. Remember that I'll always believe in you. She paused with her hands on Megan's head as though she were giving a blessing. My darling, gentle girl, you're the one who might take this the hardest. Just remember you come from strong, sturdy people who down through the years have had the courage to do what must be done. And Peg, Frances could hear the catch in Ma's voice as she stroked Peg's cheek. Peg, love, there's so much joy in you always spilling out. It'll make the going easy. Oh, how I'll miss that happy laughter. Ma, Petey whimpered, and Ma bent to hold his face in her hands. You've nothing to fear, lad. Frances will keep a special watch on you. You're so young, all this will soon be tucked in a far corner of your mind. Frances could barely hear her mother's whisper, Oh, Petey, don't completely forget your Ma. Ma rose. "One last kiss before we say goodbye," she said, and turned to Frances, holding her tight. "I know that someday you'll understand and forgive me, love," she murmured. "If I didn't know that, I couldn't bear to see you hurt this way." Frances's cheeks were damp, as her mother's tears mingled with her own, and still she didn't speak. Finally Ma let go, her eyes brimming with moisture. Ma's gaze fell on each of her children in turn, and then she blew them all a kiss and turned away. Frances watched her mother stride down the hall and desperately fought against the panic that made her want to run, screaming after Ma. At the corner of the hall, Ma paused, glancing back for a second before she disappeared from sight. "Don't leave us, Ma," Frances whispered. "I want to stay with you. I don't want any part of this life in the West."